Daniel Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the Week 3 matchup between the Georgia Bulldogs and the South Carolina Gamecocks. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 3. You got Georgia's once again ranked as the top team in the nation, and rightfully so. Georgia looks just as good as they were last season, especially with that brutal defense. And they're taking on a South Carolina team that's definitely talented. They got some major potential, but South Carolina has to prove it, and this is a great opportunity for them to do so. We'll be covering a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting out with their team trends. Georgia beat Samford 33-0 in their Week 2 matchup. So Georgia took care of them and shut them out in the end. And they're 2-0. And this defense, I mean, we saw it in Week 1 when they played Oregon. Oregon was ranked 11th at the time, and Georgia beat them 49-3. They just absolutely dominated Oregon in that game, and you could see that defense just absolutely go to work on Oregon. And so Georgia, this is a team that's ranked number 1 once again. They jumped Alabama in the AP poll, and the Bulldogs are definitely, I mean, they're looking just as good as they were last season when they won a national title. South Carolina, they lost to Arkansas on the road 30-44 in Week 2. Arkansas being ranked 16th last week. So, I mean, they kept it close for a while. I mean, in the end, they lost by a couple of touchdowns. They scored 30 points, which isn't bad, but I mean, their defense allowed a lot of points to Arkansas in that game there. So South Carolina's 1-1. They beat Georgia State in Week 1, 35-14. So South Carolina, they did have a decent win in Week 1. I mean, this is still a team that I feel like hasn't reached their full potential. I mean, Spencer Rattler is a quarterback who's shown tremendous potential in the past to be an elite quarterback. He just hasn't really shown it quite yet. Definitely the turnovers. I mean, he's got 2 touchdowns, over 3 interceptions so far, which isn't great. Yeah, South Carolina, they got tremendous potential. I mean, it's not just Spencer Rattler. That offense is super talented. Defensively, they could be better so far, but I mean, this is the time to shine for South Carolina and to really show the potential that they do have. Games be on Saturday, September 17th in Columbia. So the Gamecocks are the home team for this matchup, and it's at noon Eastern. Spread's going Georgia by 24.5 for this game. So Georgia's favored by almost 25 points for this matchup, and that is the opening spread. So that could change over the course of the week, but I wouldn't expect it to shift too much. Over-under's 50.5, and your FPI is going Georgia 94.1%. So Georgia's favored by a significant amount in this matchup, in the spread and also in the FPI. Series history, Georgia leads at 53-10. They've won the last 2 matchups and 4 out of the last 5. Here's a stat comparison for this matchup. Georgia's got 41 points a game in their first 2 games of the season, and 1.5 points allowed on average. So, I mean, that Georgia defense has allowed 3 points in the past 2 games, and those 3 points were to Oregon. So no doubt this defense is very strong. 395 pass yards a game, 129 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 141 for passing, 79 for rushing. So Georgia's been fairly strong in the passing game so far this season, nearly averaging 400 pass yards in the past couple of games. And then obviously they've been very strong on the defensive side of the ball. As for South Carolina, 32 points per game, 29 points allowed, 301 pass yards a game, 59 rush yards. So South Carolina's also been fairly strong in the passing game, at least versus their rushing game. But it's a bit more concerning for South Carolina because they've only averaged 59 rush yards. Then for yards allowed, 136 for passing, 247 for rushing. So the rush defense has allowed nearly 250 yards on average in the past couple of games. Here are your recent matchups. Both teams obviously played 2 games to this point. Georgia beat Samford, shut them down 33-0 in Week 2, beat Oregon 49-3 in Week 1. And for South Carolina, they lost to Arkansas 30-44 and beat Georgia State 35-14. Some key points for this one: Georgia 2-0. They look just as good as they were in 2021. I mean, once again, you heard all that talk about Alabama and Ohio State all offseason long. But then there's Georgia back here who looks literally just as good as they were last season when they won a national title. I mean, this team is, I think Georgia's for real this season. I mean, defensively, they're brutal. They've only allowed 3 points in the past 2 games. Once again, those 3 points being to Oregon. Offensively, I mean, this team might be even stronger than they were last season, which would be incredible for Georgia. I mean, Stetson Bennett, his stats so far this season: 49 for 66, nearly 700 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he's had a great start to the season. Of course, he got the top running back on this team, Kendall Milton, so far, who's rushed for 135 yards, which definitely is impressive. And Kenny McIntosh, the top in receiving, with 178 yards so far. I mean, Stetson Bennett, he's been great. He can be even better. I think Georgia's got a very high ceiling moving forward. into the rest of the season here. South Carolina coming off of a tough, close loss to Arkansas. They lost by 2 touchdowns in the end. They kind of hung around for most of the game, even though they didn't lead for too much of it. But for South Carolina in this matchup, it's going to be crucial that they do not have turnovers, because that's going to, I mean, that's just what's going to kill South Carolina here. You got to make the most of all the possessions you have, because, I mean, against a brutal Georgia defense like this, I mean, if you can get any points up on the board, it's going to be huge. So, and especially on defense for South Carolina, you're not going to win this game by scoring. I mean, you're not going to be able to score over 30 points in this game. I'm just going to say that right now. I mean, it's going to be almost impossible to score 30 points here. So, I mean, defensively, you got to be really strong. You can't let Georgia score a lot of points on you, especially early. You got to keep it close. Defensively, you got to play really well. Keep it lower scoring, and potentially you got a chance. But, I mean, especially, I mean, Georgia's not going to allow a lot of points in this game here. Their defense is just too good. So you're going to need to really do well defensively, and offensively, Spencer Rattler needs to find a way to get some points up on the board and put together some successful drives. They need to force some turnovers, though, too. That's what I want to consider here for South Carolina. Is, I mean, you got to pick off Stetson Bennett a couple of times here, at least force a fumble or two if you want to stay in this game here, because, I mean, once again, you need as many possessions as you can get in a game like this, going up against a brutal defense. And the good thing is for South Carolina, too, is that they do have a home field advantage for this matchup. So it's an interesting game. Let's get to the prediction here for Georgia and South Carolina. I'm going to go with Georgia in the end. 34-13 is my predicted final score. So I do want to take Georgia by a decent amount here. I just think Bulldogs are, I mean, they're too strong right now, and I feel like, I mean, this is a team that I just couldn't pick South Carolina to win this game without a doubt. And Georgia, looking the way they have the past couple of weeks, they look just as good as they were last season. I mean, look at that Oregon game back in week 1, just completely dominated the Ducks. 49-3 there, and I mean, Oregon's a good football team. They got some talent for sure, and Georgia just made it look easy there. So I think for South Carolina here, they'll score some points. They'll get up to 13, but in the end, Georgia is simply the better team in this matchup. I'm going to go 34-13 here. 70% towards Georgia, considering making that higher, but I'm just going to go with 70% for now. Over-under is 50.5. I'll take the under for this matchup, just by a little bit here in South Carolina to cover the spread. The spread's currently 24.5 points towards Georgia, so I think South Carolina does keep Georgia within 40 points, or at least keeps their offense within getting 40 points. So I think on defense, South Carolina has a decent game, but on offense, it's just going to be brutal for them. I mean, I think that they can score maybe upwards of 20 points, but, I mean, defensively, South Carolina is going to really have to have a great day if they want to stay in this matchup in the end. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this game, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.